There's no doctor, there's nobody who is going to know more than you. And you need to educate yourself. Education is empowerment. And that's what's so exciting where we sit today. You really can truly get data that will help inform you to make the best decisions because we are all unique individuals.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. We are here to keep talking about mental health, mental fitness, making sure we're all making progress together and learning from our friends and experts in the field. And we have just a wonderful person with us today, Jason Wachob, who many of you, I would say, don't know, but you do know. And you know because so many of us have been getting information and health information from Mindbodygreen. I've known Jason for years, since right a couple years after he, with a wonderful group of folks, founded Mindbodygreen. He's the co-CEO now. He and his wife Colleen have just been a force in the wellness world. They organized Revitalize, which was a kind of gathering years ago that brought so many of us in the wellness world together. So many of our guests are folks that I met years ago at Revitalize. Some of those folks like Rich Roll have really gone on to really lead our conversation. Jason also has a couple of books out, WELL Wealth, talking about the need to really focus on our wellness as opposed to just our financial health, as well as The Joy of Wellbeing, his most recent book with his wife Colleen. And they really are looking at the wellness world with this 30,000 view, because they literally know every expert, have interviewed them, talked to them about their ideas, about the research and the science. And so, Jason, it's a treat to have you on. You've really been one of the folks who, from the very beginning, has supported me, supported nutritional psychiatry. You've always really emphasized having highly qualified people be leading the conversation on your site. So it's just a treat to have you on and get the conversation with you going. So thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure is all mine, Drew. It's been a joy to call you a friend over a decade. It was 10 years ago since we did Revitalize. I knew you before then. So just a pleasure to be on your show, and congrats on all your success.
Well, thanks so much. I remember the very beginning of the Happiness Diet when you were just starting to do interviews, just starting to go around and really, saw what was going to happen in some ways before anyone else in my world. And it's been really just wonderful having you. So many of us have really been such a steady counsel to so many of us and a mentor in a lot of ways. But I want to go back because you represent a piece of history to me that I want you to take us back in a little time machine. And I want to go back to the first day that Mindbodygreen goes online. Now, a lot of you might know this, but Mindbodygreen is really one of the top, if not the top, health and wellness site for probably the last decade. I mean, I remember dropping by the office and looking up, and there were just millions and millions of people actively on the site at that moment. And it just blew my mind. So, Jason, take us all the way back in history when you hit go and this comes online. Where are you? What's happening? What are you all thinking?
Sure. So I'll start with the origin story. In 2008 into 2009, I had 2 extruded discs in my lower back pressing on my sciatic nerve. It was a combination of an old college basketball injury, not so good diet. My idea of diet back then was steak and martinis at the Palm Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. I consumed so much in a year. My face is on the wall there next to Adam Sandler and Joe Namath. Still pretty insane.
It's like an award for eating the most steak and drinking the most martinis. It was like they're keeping track.
Well, just to get some points with you, there were a lot of olives in those martinis. Yeah. And so that was my idea of health. I still eat meat, just not as much, and try to opt for quality when I can. So the basketball injury, the diet, the stress, I was running a startup at the time that wasn't doing so well. I found myself flying a lot. I flew over 100,000 miles domestic in 1 year. I'm 6'7". Me in a coach seat is not good for my lower back or the person in front of me. And, I really was struggling. I couldn't walk. My right leg was like a lightning rod, and walking brings me joy. That's one of the things I do for my mental health. If I don't get 10,000 steps a day, I am a grumpy dinosaur, as my daughters would say. And I couldn't walk. I went to a doctor. He said, you need surgery. I have nothing against surgery, but I generally see it as a last resort. So I sought a second opinion. That doctor said the same thing. He said, you need surgery. And it
And
was
you're like
almost like an
early
afterthought.
30s now, right? Like late 20s, early
I'm in mid
30s.
30s.
I
I'm
mean,
mid 30s. I turned 50 in November, so this is like late 30s. And it was, in retrospect, I had back problems all throughout college playing basketball. I just didn't know it because it manifested itself in other parts of the body, not the lower back specifically.
Jason, everybody's want to know where you played.
Columbia.
Oh, and
Yeah.
what spot do you play on the floor?
So this is another just. I'm really a 4, but we didn't have a 4. It was a 5 and 2 threes. So I played the 5. I'm 6'7", but they listed me as 6'9". So there you go.
That sounds like college basketball.
So at any rate, this doctor said, you need surgery, but, he says, well, maybe yoga or therapy could help. And Colleen, my wife, co-founder and co-CEO at a yoga practice at the time, we were dating, we weren't married yet. And I said, you know what, maybe I'll try some yoga. Started with some really light yoga, 5 to 10 minutes in the morning and evening, started to feel better. The pain started to subside. The pain used to run all the way through my toes. It started to like go north, so to speak. And that's a sign that it's working. And over the course of 6 months, I couldn't walk, right leg was excruciating, to being completely fine. And there were other changes that happened. I looked at my diet, started to eat more plants, started to look at stress. And I had this kind of awakening where I said, everyone's got this wellness word wrong. Back then it was equated with the spa. Anything that was holistic was just like new age, bat crazy, west side of LA, Brooklyn, Boulder. We all know what that looks like. Western wasn't the answer for me. And I thought where the future was this blend of well-being, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and environmental well-being, and that they were all interconnected. Mindbodygreen, one word, not 3. And that was the big vision, and do it in a way that was based in science-based holistic well-being, not emotional-based well-being that wasn't necessarily rooted in science or the facts.
Wasn't just like a feeling. It was something that had, a lot going on underneath it that maybe wasn't being talked about or wasn't being emphasized or prioritized in the community back then.
100%. And in some ways, I think we're back there. But that's we can talk about where we.
Well, let's go
today.
full cycle. So the beginning is you see this opportunity, and I think so many folks listening, we often have this. We have an idea, and we think maybe it's a good idea, and the next steps, building, a company, finding partners, and then getting to this moment where I have this idea that there's like a switch you hit, and all of a sudden you come online with a bunch of content. Can you tell us about that day? Like, what were you thinking? What was happening?
Well, so in the entrepreneurial side, that was definitely a journey. It did not happen overnight. My co-founders, Colleen, Tim, and Carver, all kind of worked part-time. I went all in full-time. We didn't make money for 3 years. And so this was not an overnight success. I started to get to know you, I think, in like 2012, 13. That's when things started to really click. But I'm like 3 years into this. So I was, it was definitely a journey. I heard all sorts of feedback from people in the early days. Well, the audience isn't big enough. No one cares about this. There's no advertisers. You can't build a. So I heard it all, but it was definitely a journey. And I think something we've held true, if we fast forward to 24, the values are still the same. We believe in the blend of mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, environmental well-being, all connected. I think the world's caught up. Another thing I used to hear a lot of in 09 is like, I don't get the green part. Now everyone kind of gets the green part.
Right.
Whether it's toxins, climate change, we're all there. No need to explain that one. So the mission's still there. The values are still there in terms of we believe in lifestyle modification first. And I think, and I'll just pause there because I think many in our community believe in this binary world where it's lifestyle versus pharmaceutical or Western intervention. And my view today, well, I said my view back then was always lifestyle first. Pharmaceutical saves lives. But we're definitely overprescribed. there's a lot of nuance there. I don't think the world does nuance well. And I'll quote you, one of my favorite lines, which I think hit home for me. Magnesium and lithium are right next to each other in the periodic table. We're
That's true.
very open to, I'm a big believer in magnesium. We have a supplement line where, I take a lot of magnesium, and I think many are big proponents of supplementing. Magnesium is powerful, but lithium can be a really powerful pharmaceutical intervention, which saves lives. And I think there, for many years, has been a stigma around pharmaceutical companies at large. And what I would say is people should be skeptical of pharmaceutical companies. They should be skeptical of wellness companies, of every company. Our motto is, be the CEO here, get educated. First and foremost, as a platform, we want to educate people to inform you so you can make the best decisions for yourself. And I think the most fascinating change I've seen in the past decade has been this idea that I think many are buying into, where in the lifestyle first community, we're coming to the realization that lifestyle may only be able to get you so far, like maybe 80%, 90% in terms of achieving your optimal health span, or I like to say joy span, because there's no point in extending the years with great health if you're not happy. I think that weighs into, like, I'm in great shape. I have a great VO2 max, but like my kids don't talk to me. That doesn't seem like fun.
No, and I'm glad to hear you mention that, Jace, because I've been a little concerned. There's such a focus on longevity recently. There's such a focus on health and building muscle mass and building your VO2 max. And oftentimes folks may be leading some of this. It does feel like there's a real lack sometimes of emotional health or emotional awareness. Like relationships are, I don't know, feels like a very male movement about like rucking with your bros. And, some of the more nuanced things that take lots of time, lots of energy, and are very hard, building a meaningful and intimate relationship. If you have kids, really getting into the deep end of pool of what it means to be a parent, both for you and for your kids. It's a little bit of a concerning focus these days.
100%. And I buy into everything. Like, I believe in all those things. I believe in, this is a shift for me. I believe in building lean muscle mass. I believe in VO2 max. I believe in rucking. I believe in all these things. And I think one of our core values, I think there's a rigidity in our space. And what Colleen and I like to say is, be rigid about being flexible. And in our journey in Mindbodygreen, we've changed our views about many things, including our personal routines. I went from yoga saved my life to doing yoga every day of the week to yoga's now 10 minutes on the weekends for me, partly because of my kids. And that shift has also gone to resistance training and VO2 max. And the journey started with yoga, and where I sit today, I turned 50 in November. I'm passionate about longevity. Men in my family have a terrible track record here. Father and both grandfathers were all dead before 50, 2 to heart disease, 1 to cancer. And so when I started to get serious about this with young kids, I went beyond like the blood pressure. And I see Dr. Frank Lippman, who and he's like, let's do some more testing. And so I do extensive blood work and found out I had sky high homocysteine. And homocysteine is essentially an inflammation marker in the blood. And high homocysteine levels could lead to a blood clot, aneurysm, pulmonary embolism, stroke, things you don't want. You want your homocysteine to be under 15. Mine was 63.
What was driving it so high? Did anybody know?
So here's the thing with homocysteine. If you have the MTHFR gene, which almost half the population does, and if you drill deeper, I have the double SNP and I have the C677T. So I am more inclined to be out of whack here. And I always joke, my size maybe played into this. I just am a little bit of a freak. And I remember going to Frank when this happened. I immediately did not go to Dr. Google, which I usually would do. I was like, what do I do, Frank? Diet, if surgery, pharmaceutical. And he was like, no, like, you have this gene, you don't methylate properly. I am going to messenger you over supplements. and we're both in New York at the time. I now live in Miami. And like, we're not waiting for the mail or FedEx. We're messengering you over. And through supplementation, my homocysteine went from 63 to 15 to now I sit between 10 and 12. And I felt fine. No signs. And like, and the reality was I was maybe I was a walking blood clot. I had no idea. And this is when I always encourage, like, a lot of doctors don't test for it. Sometimes there's no feeling attached. And if you have the MTHFR gene, which almost half the population here, like, you could be at risk. And like, this one is a scary one. If you think in terms of quality of life, like what happens after a stroke or an aneurysm, like it's not a great recovery. And so I went from I believed in supplements to like, wow, I really believe in supplements, and led the inspiration to like our supplement line and our focus on science and efficacy, and like our focus as a brand, I think, to longevity and trying to make it more approachable, and also cross over to women. Because I agree with your, I think, baseline assumption. If I were to guess where you were going, is a lot of the men leading the longevity conversation today are brilliant, but completely unapproachable, and really don't get on the emotional, really don't touch on the emotional and mental side of well-being, have routines that are just completely out of the question if you have kids or a family or you're working. And I think that's become our focus as a brand, and try to bring that conversation to women, make it accessible, leverage science, talk about, VO2 max resistance training, but in a way that, takes into consideration that many people don't have 3 hours to do a morning routine and to do the cold plunge and then the meditation and then the VO2 max. And the next thing you know, if you're a dad and you're doing that and you've got young kids, your wife is saying, I'm getting divorced. A lot to unpack there.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think for everyone listening, there's this pressure we sometimes feel. I feel it, where I feel sometimes almost like confused or disoriented, that for all the time I've spent trying to understand more of this stuff, there's something new just came out, and I'm a kind of a sucker because I haven't heard. I'm still thinking the old way, and you end up in a kind of almost defensive stance, trying to, which none of us like. Trying to kind of explain why you're still doing the thing that you've been doing for a while. But I also like the time notion. When we talk about accessibility in mental health care, I live in a town where there are probably more mental health clinicians per capita than any place in the world, in Jackson. However, Jackson, if you talk to the average person, really is sure it's in a horrible mental health crisis. And so when we think about access, it's not necessarily just having enough providers, right? It's also us having space, time, in some ways, I don't want to use this word, but sort of the privilege to engage in healthcare, which really isn't how it should be. It just, I think, speaks to the busyness of our lives, the way that we're very overscheduled, and the way that health and health routines have gotten overly complicated.
Right. And I think I'll hit on two things where I was starting to come around to where we sit today. So to finish off the conversation on lifestyle above everything, and maybe exclusively for more audience, I think where we sit today is we've come to that realization where maybe it can only get you so far. And there's an increasing openness to, hey, I got my diet dialed in, I exercise, I sleep, my relationships are good. But you know what? There's always something going on with our genetics. We all have it. We all have a family history, whether it's cancer, diabetes, cognitive decline, CBD. And what's so fascinating is there are pharmaceutical interventions which are becoming more popular and widely accepted, where you can integrate a pharmaceutical into your very strong lifestyle routine, and you can really make a dent in terms of your longevity. And so, Peter Attia, who your listeners may know, has been very vocal as it relates to cardiovascular disease. It's still the number one killer of people in the world. And he believes you can completely take it off the table with statins and low dose statins. So if you're concerned about it at all, you may still dial in your diet to a place where, there's only so far you could lower your ApoB, which is something everyone should test for. Maybe you can only get it to like the 60s or 70s, and it's killing you because you feel like you're just eating cucumbers and lettuce all day, and you're wearing. And Attia would say, You could take a low dose statin and I could bring your ApoB to childlike levels. You could probably eat a little bit more freely and it's completely off the table. To me, that's very attractive and a great use of pharmaceuticals. And the list goes on. I think we're at such an interesting time where those worlds are coming together. And I think people in our world, which leans a little bit more holistic, are becoming more open to it. There's less of a stigma. Whereas 10 years ago, like if we were walking around Revitalize, the event we used to do, and someone started talking about like the pharmaceutical experiment that they were doing on themselves, wow, people would be aghast. Hey, did you see so and so is doing that? Like, let's get them.
Right, like so-and-so's taking a statin, or the ones that really get the bad rep, I think, in the wellness community. Yeah, so unfortunate is the antidepressants. Like nobody thinks about
100%, 100%.
It's like everyone loves to talk about how inflammation is awful, but it feels like the soundbite that Prozac, fluoxetine is an incredibly powerful central, meaning in your brain, anti-inflammatory. It's like that's a statement heading to the dark side.
To build off that, you told me you just recently had Scott Galloway. Galloway will talk about this, how the media, unfortunately, is led by this, if it bleeds, it leads. And polarization, very strong views that incite anger. Galloway cites a study that Wharton did in the New York Times, the most popular emailed articles. I want to say if they classified them by emotion and anger. I forget the exact percentage, but essentially if the headline incited anger, it was more likely to be read and shared. And to your point, you're talking about nuance with mental health and prescriptions. Nuance does not play well on social media. What plays well is pharmaceutical and prescriptions of the devil. You can heal everything by, eliminating gluten or, healing inflammation, or vice versa. Pharmaceuticals are the savior. This diet's garbage. There's not really a lot of room in the middle to do well on social media. So
it's been so hard for me, Jason, to be honest. It really has. It feels, when I'm in the wellness world, somehow I've become the person cheering for Zoloft and Prozac and reminding people that they're efficacious, or that, lithium has a role, or that a lot of, the blanket statements that are getting made are really awful. That when you sit with individuals who are struggling with their mental health and you see, a little touch of this or that from the psychopharmacological world could really be helpful in easing their pain and potentially saving their life. And you're met with this pressure by a lot of folks who are, pretty misinformed often, that, you're being horrible. And then you head into the, the conventional psychiatric world, and the idea you're talking about diet is, taken seriously more so now, but really, a little silly. It's like a wellness intervention, or thinking about maybe some supplements like magnesium or St. John's wort that have, some evidence behind them. And especially for people, a lot of patients I treat, for whatever reason, do have a strong set of opinions. And being a clinician, you understand over time, your job is to serve your patients. It's not that we all have to, everyone who sees me needs to agree with me or engage in nutritional psychiatry. Some of my patients don't want to do that stuff. They're still my patients. And so it's been really hard to kind of, you almost feel you're not you haven't picked a tribe. You're not on the right team, and you're not all in one way.
And that's the problem with media. Essentially, we all live in our own algorithms. And that unfortunately leads to tribes forming and then only being fed the information that essentially you want to see. I think that's a big part of the problem. And I think in our world, well-being is alchemy. It's a little bit of everything.
A little bit of like you can put all these things together and kind of make gold, but it's going to be your own equation.
It's going to be your own equation. And I think that's one of the most exciting things where we are right now. We've come so far in testing. And I think the belief that, or the idea that there's this one size fits all approach is just completely absurd. I think there are some, best practices. I think there are some generalizations that largely hold true. But for the most part, we are individuals with our unique set of genetics, weaknesses, strengths, and testing has come so far that we can show you that whether it's genetic testing, whether it's lab work, whether it's full body scans. I've done them all. And, I bring up my homocysteine. My homocysteine's crazy. No one, and there are other people who have other things going on. Someone may, I know we love anchovies. Anchovies may be the greatest thing ever for you, but there's someone else over here, makes their body go haywire. You could find all this out now.
Well, you can find out so much more. And I think that it's with all this information, a lot of people are trying to wade through it and understand, what do you do? I've had a lot of patients in this first line of, screening scans, essentially, where, conventional medicine, I think, is very worried. The most common finding my patients are seeing in their scans are cysts, a cyst in the liver, a cyst in the brain, a cyst in the kidney. And it's not clear what to do sometimes. And at the same time, if we see things that potentially could evolve into, let's say, a cancer, boy, we want to know about those right away. And so it's a new era where there's so much information. Are there ways that you see people getting better educated on how to use all this new technology? I mean, I think a lot of us get overwhelmed and either don't engage with it. I think I'm a little guilty of that. I don't think I know what my ApoB is, which is a horrible thing to say as a middle-aged guy.
True,
and then I
come on.
some people,
we need you around.
Well, thank you, Jason. But it's something I should. Oh, I like the way you framed it, Jason, which is you looked at your family tree and you just saw the men weren't leading long lives, and there was something cardiovascular going on.
I'm a big believer in doing at least one time in your life, and this is becoming more accessible with price, extensive lab work. It may run you up to, Mark Hyman just launched something, Function Health. You could do that. My lab work is essentially with Quest. You can do it with LabCorp. These are all basic. You just have to align on. And actually, in the book, we link to it. I show everyone the extensive lab work I do. It's a lot. It's north of 25 vials of blood. But I'm just saying, you do that once. If you do that once, and if you do genetic testing, I like the 3x4 genetic test. I think it's about $300 because it gives you like a 20-page PDF and it's color coded and you can understand it, like probably 80 to 90%. If you get on with a practitioner, you get it 100% there. So I like that genetic testing with the lab work. And I also did Boston Heart, which tells me how I absorb sat, fat, and cholesterol. So I'm a hyper absorber of that.
Meaning that we always hear, dietary cholesterol doesn't matter that much in terms of your blood lipid panel. You're the kind of person where it does.
So it does, and yes, exactly. So for me, this is a great example as we think about the diet wars and nutrition. I'm a hyper absorber. So basically, the sat, fat just sits in there. And so I did an experiment. I was having coconut milk. Plant-based coconut milk is 100% vegan, plant-based in my smoothies twice a day. My ApoB went from 79 to 110, which is where you don't want to be. It went from the green to the red. My LDL-C, I think, tripled. Basically my lipid panel went haywire. Went way red, danger zone.
You're the example the cardiologists want to point to that, hey, folks, this whole coconut fat trend is not going to work out for some of you.
For some, but here's the thing. So I did the experiment to let's get it back. I swapped the coconut milk for clean oat milk. I love milk. And I actually ate a lot more fish. And I still ate meat. Here's the thing. But I switched to leaner cuts of meat. So think venison. Venison's low in sat, fat, nutrient dense. I cut out some of the heavier. So the thing with the vegan diet too, there are a lot of vegan foods that are actually high in sat, fat. So in 8 weeks, I went back to my ApoB went from 110 to 71. And I share this in my Instagram, all the stats. My LDL, I would say my particles went from 2,400 to less than 1,000, completely reversed itself. And this was just eliminating coconut milk to oat milk, having more fish, and I still ate meat, but just lean cuts. And so this idea that meat is good or bad and plants are good or bad, insane. And so this is just
Totally.
me. I did this test, and I encourage everyone's Boston Heart. You could be the other end of this, where you're an underabsorber. And you know what? Go to town, have ribeyes every day. And so this is where we sit in the context. So like pointing the test, like I did the 3x4 genetics, the extensive blood work with the Boston Heart. That was extraordinary. I've done the Prenuvo. I think that's like a bonus if you're concerned about, like that was extraordinarily helpful for me. Like these things, it's, the blood work's probably 3 to 400, depending on insurance. The genetics is 3 or 400. You learn so much about yourself, and with some homework, you can become the CEO of your health, because ultimately there's no doctor, there's nobody who is going to know more than you. And you need to educate yourself. Education is empowerment. And that's what's so exciting where we sit today. You really can truly get data that will help inform you to make the best decisions, because we are all unique individuals.
Everyone, I think I brought Jason on in part because I don't think I'm very good at this, and it's been bothering me. A couple of the scan places have reached out saying, "Hey, come do a scan," and I find myself a little like scared of what they might find, and I'm not someone who likes to sit in denial. I find I've done some of the genetic testing and definitely found out some pretty I guess big things about myself that have taken me just a while to sit with and understand. And so I guess I wonder, for everybody listening, Jason, if you could tell us a little bit about your how you've become interested and not scared of the data. And maybe that's a silly way to put it.
Well, I think it's empowering. And Colleen, my wife, definitely sat on the side of. So, for example, she didn't want to do the genetic testing, but she jumped at the Prenuvo. And Colleen,
how'd you guys understand that?
So she runs, her view was, and she runs more anxious than me, if there's something wrong, I want to know, because you can do something about it. So I'll use the example of pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer typically shows up when it's too late. That's when the symptoms occur. And there's not much Western medicine or any medicine can do to save you. The beauty of and I think where we've advanced in the quote unquote Western medical system so far is we're pretty darn good at treating cancer if we catch it early. And so pancreatic cancer, the symptoms, you're not going to catch it till like stage 3 or 4. And by then there's not much you can do. But with the Prenuvo scan, I think Maria Menounos, the television personality, kind of put this on the map, pretty healthy, and discovered she had, I think it was stage 1 pancreatic in a Prenuvo scan. She's fine now. Caught it. We got it. There are things you catch early. It's the reason why people do colonoscopies. You catch something early, you're good. Like, we've advanced. If you catch something late, not saying it's impossible, but it's an uphill battle. I think that's the beauty of the scans. And there are little things. For example, for me, I had no idea I had a deviated septum my whole life. And it's so severely deviated. When the call to action from the scan was, you should see an ENT. So I go to an ENT, and he was like, yeah, this is terrible. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, okay, show me, breathe through your nose right now. So if you're watching on YouTube, I go, he's like, you see how your nostril collapses? I'm like, oh my God, yes. He's like, yeah, it's so deviated, you have nasal valve collapse. I'm like, was this like a basketball injury? Was this He's like, no, I think you've had it your whole life. You know what's going to help you tremendously is just like nasal strips when you sleep. I'm like, this is amazing.
Nasal strips, because it holds the nose open, or
Yeah, it holds the nose
Oh,
open.
wow.
And like, even though I am very conscious about breathing through my nose, I guess I had no idea I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Also picked up very slight scoliosis that was almost undetectable from my chiropractor. And that stemmed from I tend to sleep on one side because of it. I dislocated my shoulder playing basketball. And so I just don't tend to sleep on that side. And so, okay, I can fix that by like just putting a pillow between my legs when I sleep and trying to sleep on the other side. But like be aware of it, because that's another one. It's like once you start, the scoliosis starts to become more severe, there's less you can do. But to me, it's very tiny. So it's like, all right, you can stop it here. You're good. So those are like some minor things I find out in the scan. Colleen found, I forget the exact term, but like Colleen found something with her heart, which is structural. She's totally fine. But it's like, okay, every couple of years you should just check in on this. Her father has the same thing. I forget the exact term, but it's like something she should be aware of. Like, okay, good.
See, everyone, I'm sure you're hearing this. Is the way that Jason and Colleen are very fluid in, I think it's because in part they've been in this world of caring about wellness, caring about advances in conventional health. And so I think it's that fluency that I'm hoping for, of having a better sense of, I know my MTHFR status, but there's something about, especially as we get into middle age, of really, in some ways taking the bull by the horns, getting as much data as we can, not getting overwhelmed by it, making an action plan. And as Jason is saying, considering things that, I just turned 50. I think I should be on a statin. I've
Yeah.
got great lipid numbers. I also have a bunch of male relatives who've died of heart attacks. And so it's one of those places, I think, in the wellness world we get, it's like cheating. And one of the great things I think about Peter Attia's influence on the conversation has been his emphasis on data, evidence, and trials. And because so
Yes.
often we have science being used in a, I would say, we'll say evil, but science being used in a manipulative way, that a lot of us don't have the scientific literacy that we want. It's easy to pull a study and show something, prove something. I was just writing an email to a psychopharmacology listserv that I'm on with a bunch of colleagues I really respect. And it's hard for me to write to this listserv without pulling 3 or 4 articles, making sure that they have a good number of people, making sure that the scientific quality is reasonably good, uh, because that's just the way we think together as a group. That there's a real variability in the quality of evidence. I think it's hard for us sometimes to cut through when there's such a powerful soundbite from someone.
Well, and I'll just build off of variability. I believe science is a verb and not a noun.
And tell everybody, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think there's a tendency to establish a point of view and double down on it and not deviate from that point of view and not be open to perhaps a new way of thinking about that point of view or a new study. And as you know, there's a zillion studies and you can twist and turn them in any way you want to. But I think in the world of influencers and social media, it doesn't necessarily pay for a personality to deviate from that point of view. It pays
Niche
to double
down, they
down
tell
on it.
us.
Exactly. It pays to double down and attack others who don't share that point of view and have this binary view of black and white, good versus evil. And I think it's unfortunate because I think the beauty lies in the nuance, and the beauty with science is it's always evolving. We're always learning new things. And I think what worked 5 years ago, there may be a whole better option today. And it's going to change again in 5 years, whether it's nutrition, whether it's a pharmaceutical, whether it's a surgery, constantly evolving. If we view science as a noun, it's this thing that doesn't change and can't be challenged. And I don't think that's healthy.
How do you and Colleen make decisions about your health when there isn't good data? Part of the focus on science and data, which as a physician I like, and it's how I sort things out in my own mind and with my patients. But then you bump into things where there's no data. And of course, that doesn't mean that
Yeah,
it doesn't work or it can't work. Um, Sometimes there's no data just because there's been an oversight. Nutritional
sure.
psychiatry is a great example of that. Jason weighed in on my first book way back in 2011. Nutritional psychiatry wasn't even a word. That was not a concept, right? We did not have any randomized trials in 2011. Today, 2024, we've got a good 7 to 10 solid quality randomized trials showing that a Mediterranean style diet can be influential, particularly on depression outcomes. Uh, yeah, how do you guys sort it out when there isn't science? Something new comes out, everybody's raving about it.
I think we think about it a couple of ways. On a personal level, when it's something we're dealing with, I can speak to. I rely on my faith. I rely on my gut instincts. I believe in soliciting multiple points of view. I, as I, if it's something not related to me or related to me, and it's something we're trying to assess, uh, I tend to look at who is saying what and how they're speaking. I think people who tend to speak in absolutes, you should kind of watch out. Something is 100% good or 100% bad. I tend to lean towards experts who are a little bit more strategic or careful with their language, cautious. This study supports the hypothesis that versus this study unequivocally says that X is better than Z. I like supports. I like may benefit. I like boosts. I like this was what we know about the study. This is what I like to. There are definitely some tells, if you will, in terms of personalities and how they speak about certain studies that are watchouts. And so I think something we've built over a decade, almost 15 years, is kind of like a good BS meter for where to maybe question, where to poke, where to solicit second, third, fourth opinions, and where to really buy in and make strategic decisions about how we want to cover something or shine a light on it or not cover.
Jason, I feel you're right at the heart of the next question I had for you, which is really how do you go around figuring out like who's someone to trust and who's I would call false idol of wellness. There are a lot of influencers out there, and I have patients come in and they tell me, they're convinced they got to be, let's say, carnivore, and it's a challenging situation where you don't want to disparage another person, but you're hearing your patients be influenced by someone who's, I'm going to say, nefarious. Really, for I'm not sure
Yeah.
what reason has. To me, it feels like not the patient's health in mind, but their agenda and their message in mind. How have you guys avoided that? You have so many. I mean, you know all the experts.
I think it's a lot of what I had just communicated. And I think I'll also add that know that all these experts are humans. They are flawed. They are, and I also think all of them have good intentions. Some of them believe what they're saying. Some of them know they're stretching it and they're doing it for business reasons. But I will also say that for anyone, not for anyone, I'd say almost all people who maybe fall into this bucket of pushing it a little bit too far, stretching things, I do think there's some good there. So carnivore, for example, you brought up. There are people really pushing carnivore very hard. I'll go back to my own N of one experiment. Carnivore clearly does not work for everyone. But I do believe for some people it could be very effective. And I do believe for people who are or experts who are really pushing the carnivore diet, I think they believe in it and that they believe they're having incredible results. And I think they probably are. With that said, it's not for everybody. And so whether that's someone stretching something on carnivore or gluten or whatever the topic du jour of or enemy of the moment to go after, I do think listen and have the ability to tune out and tune in. I think there are some experts where there's a lot of garbage, but there's also some good and things are interesting. I think it's also a struggle, and I struggle with this. A watch out is people who speak with the same level of confidence on every topic whether they're an expert or not, those are the toughest, the biggest watchouts. It's the expert who says, I'm an expert on it, like nutritional psychiatry, but if we maybe start going on something else, exercise physiology, you'll be the first person to say, like, I believe I shouldn't do this to my elbow, but I'm not an expert. It's the person the nutritional psychiatrist who will quickly segue to exercise physiology and start making statements like, I unequivocally believe that X is better than Y. That's the watch out. Same level of confidence on every topic.
It's a great indicator. Everybody, just, to sum up, Jason's really one talking about language, which is a psychiatrist I love. But as you see these always, never, every one of my patients, first of all, it's very compelling. I think the first step in some ways for a lot of us is to realize, gosh, how much we want that. Right, how much we want that expert, I just think about it as like my expert daddy, he's like, he knows
just tell me what to do.
Or,
tell me, I'm struggling, I'm hurting.
Mommy, she knows the right. Oh, of course you need this, Drew. And a way of being known and cared for kind of in a, omnipotent way that just, it would be wonderful, but it's not the reality. And then looking for people who don't stay in their lane. I'll talk to you all about mental health, but that's what I've spent my entire career doing. Talking about medications and nutritional psychiatry and psychotherapy and the nitty gritty of process and maybe a little bit of psychedelics, as I've spent a couple of years in that world. But as you move beyond that, I do try to be very cautious. We're talking about heart health and lipids. I have a little bit of knowledge, but that's not my area of expertise.
So I have a new show concept for you, given you are a psychiatrist. I would love to see you analyze personalities on social media, and just from your your experience dissecting, take the science out. This person, I think, is lying, and here's why. This person is speaking.
I just feel like I'm just going to get sued by Dave Asprey eventually, or end up in such a like battle with him, and he's going to get so much pleasure out of it. I have the trademark on National Kale Day, and I always think about sending it to him for his birthday, and then I think I should sell it to him. Right? Anyway, but
Dave, look, I like Dave, and there's a lot of good with Dave, and on some things he's brilliant, and I think are really interesting, and other things I'm like, oh, Dave, come on. You're pushing it too far.
I think he's probably one of those folks who falls into that kind of pushing the extreme opinion because it leads to a lot of sales. He has this, kind of misinformation, false information campaign going about kale and kale having too many oxalates. I mean, kale is literally the definition of a low oxalate green.
I'm not a fan of kale, but that's for other reasons, Drew.
Okay, well, and that's fine that you're not a fan of kale. I want to hear why you're not a fan of kale. Is it like flavor? Is it trendy? It's too trendy?
I'm more of an arugula guy.
Great choice. Great choice. I just put out a video on 5 greens and I'm eating more than kale. I still love kale, but there are a lot of other, you don't need a lot of basil. You don't need a lot of arugula. I mean, I'd want to address that with you, but the idea of something just, patently false, leading to just an incredible amount of media. I mean, in some ways, you see the brilliance of people as marketers, the ability to kind of create a big explosion in some ways. And I think the challenge with that is so many people end up being confused or, kind of worshiping a false idol, someone who really doesn't have any health credentials, shouldn't be advising you on your health.
And look, it's not exclusive to wellness. I think it runs rampant here, but we could talk about politics. We could talk about like this. This is the quote unquote game in 2024 and beyond. If you want to succeed and cut through the clutter in media, got to have a strong polarizing point of view.
Is it going to swing the other day? Is there hope for people like me who want to have a more balanced conversation? Like, I'm really interested in us getting along and being connected and really, truly living up to that American value of freedom, that we can be brothers and sisters in a free country doing what we want, but not be so polarized. Is there any possibility for that, Jason, or I just need to retire?
Well, Jackson Hole's a great place to be, Drew. I think, yes, I am optimistic. I do think most people don't like extremes. I'll point to, without going down the political rabbit hole, one of my favorite commentators is Bill Maher. And I think what Bill Maher does so well is he does have a point of view, but he is one of the only programs he will purposely invite people on the far right and far left on to have a discussion. And he'll push back, but he'll let people speak, and he invites that dialogue. And I think that's important. I think nuance is important. I think we all live in our own echo chambers. And I think it's really critical to challenge one's views and be open to other people's points of views, even if you differ strongly. I'll point to, I think, his success. He does that, and he does it well. And I think he in a personal level, is somewhat of an inspiration. He's able to do that successfully.
That's a really good point that was made by Michael, the author of I think it's The Theory of Everything is his book. I hope I'm getting the title right. But he talked about one of the most important things for us to do was to seek out the counsel and engage with someone who has the 180-degree opposite opinion of us. That was really one of the fundamental steps towards kind of psychological development, enlightenment, security, just really, and how hesitant we are to do that. You know, how hard that is to say, tell me about this political belief. I feel exactly the opposite.
It's critical. Just like functioning as a human when our country is so divided. Something I like to do is I will flip between Fox and MSNBC when there's anything serious politically going on, just to understand what everyone's saying. I think the reality is half the country is split, and it's not like we don't live next to each other. Maybe in sections of LA or New York we don't, but I think in the rest of the country we do. And it's really important to understand how other people feel, what they're being communicated or told, in an effort to understand the dynamics of what's happening to us.
Jason, I want to talk about mental health for just a few minutes before we have to sign off. And I want to hear, what do you think the world of wellness needs to do better in regards to mental health?
It's a good question. I think a couple of things immediately come to mind. Personally, my faith plays a huge role here. I was raised Christian, went to Sunday school. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus Christ. It's a big part of who I am. Do I go to church every Sunday? No. But I have, I pray. I have my rituals. I believe in breath work. I believe in meditation. I believe in having a higher purpose. And bridging to science, one of our dear friends who also, I believe Dr. Lisa Miller from Columbia, who also spends a lot of time in Miami. Yeah, dear friend, has done some incredible work talking about the science of spirituality and how having a spiritual practice is proven to be beneficial for one's mental health. And when we think about the mental health epidemic, specifically with kids, in Lisa's work, she's shown that when a parent or grandparent, or essentially a caregiver and child, have a strong spiritual connection, the beauty of spiritual connection, the way she defines it, is pretty broad. It could be church service. It could be, gratitude practice, volunteer, but this deeper purpose and belief and meaning. When that link is strong between caregiver and child, the child is 5 times less likely to experience depression. So I think spirituality, no matter where you sit or what you believe in or what your practice is, as a protective mechanism. The other thing that's interesting is this is protective during the course of a lifetime, not just adolescence. Wow. So spirituality as a protective mechanism against depression, as we sit in a mental health epidemic, that's front page news, if you ask me.
That must translate directly to how you're thinking about your parenting, I would guess.
Yeah. It's something, our kids go to Sunday school. Our 5-year-old is still trying to ask big questions, was I in heaven before I was born? Am I going to go to heaven? I don't want to go to heaven. I want to be here. Our 7-year-old is, I don't see God. Where's God? So, they go, they learn, you never know what's quite sinking in, but we do value that. And I think, again, it's not exclusive to potentially going to church or Sunday school. It's having some sort of gratitude practice, some connection to something bigger than oneself. And I think for me personally, that's helped me deal with loss. It's helped me deal with adversity. It's helped me deal with situations where sometimes there, were no good answers or no clear paths forward. And I think as you experience life, which can be quite brutal, I think for me, it's pretty depressing if that's it. Like I personally like the idea that there's maybe something bigger at play, and that brings me a sense of purpose when sometimes I'm struggling to find purpose, when something maybe bad happens or doesn't go my way, or just a deeper connection to what's going on in the world.
Oh, Jason, thanks so much for sharing that. You haven't heard much about your faith before, and I just love the way you speak about it. I love the way your 7-year-old asks, that question. And in some ways, is with us our entire lives. Like, I don't see you, God. Where are you? I don't see this spiritual thing. Where is it? And it's something that we feel, and it's something that generally we feel when we settle down, or when we are in places or with people who are resonating on that level, who are interested in that. Lisa Miller's been really fun to watch her really get more of a platform, but kind of encourage us and say very bold statements around the need for spirituality. I think about her as very brave doing that in medicine, where we often
brave at
like to tip
Columbia.
our hat a little bit to spirituality, but it's not something that we we don't get trained to ask our patients about it often or explicitly. We're not our clinic, Spruce Mental Health here in Jackson. We have Amy Lane, who's our spiritual director. That's actually her job title. And she was an Episcopalian priest for a long time before getting involved with psychedelic medicine and coaching and trauma work. And it's such in some ways, a loving presence, but I find a little provocative presence in the sense of, how's your spiritual life going? What is my plan for my spiritual life? How am I dedicating time and energy to that? What does that even mean for those of us who maybe weren't raised in a house of faith as Jason was? And so, these are the questions for us to sit with as we consider really one of those fundamental pieces of mental fitness. Jason and I have been working on this kind of concept of mental fitness with the new book coming out, Healing the Modern Brain, and our e-course, really trying to differentiate out the kind of buckets where people can invest energy that is going to have the highest yield. And thinking about your sense of purpose is such a critical piece. As you said, life is often and can be quite brutal and painful. And having that true north of how you are pushing through and enduring that pain for what is a really critical piece for people's mental fitness and how we kind of preserve and insulate our mental health.
And just to build off of that, I've never been to AA, but this is a building block of one of the most, AA is one of the most successful programs across any modality in terms of rehabilitation. And a core value is this sense of letting go. Letting God, if you will, taking the pressure off. Yeah, it's one of the steps, and I think it's bigger than
step one. Is you have to confront,
surrender
the idea that you surrender to the fact that you don't have control over your drinking. You have to submit to a higher power. You need help. You need others. You need something beyond the self. It's like the first step out of the alcoholic way of thinking. And AA does fascinate me. There's a international network, like every city in America, every city probably in the world at this point, you can find a group of individuals sitting together, combating their dependency or addiction or pathological relationship with alcohol. It's really, one, it shows the perniciousness and ubiquity of alcohol problems in our world. But two, I think it speaks to the power. I love how you invoke the power of how spirituality can influence and be the driver of a movement that leads to much more health and mental health.
And look, one can make the argument that it's not necessarily the dialogue that's happening in the AA group or the sermon that's taking place in church, but it's the power of a group of like-minded individuals sitting together in the right mindset in a sacred space And that connection cannot be underestimated in terms of the health benefits. It's the community, it's the connection.
Yeah, I've always loved going into churches or temples or places of worship. Um, I remember a long time ago, I went to the World Psychiatric Association. I was still a resident, and I ended up in Kyoto. And I spent the day riding a bike around, just going from temple to temple to temple, and just sitting. And I got to this like really altered state, just like wonderfully kind of I don't know, lucid and clear and kind of floaty and dreamy. And so something that, whether you're of a particular faith or not, that notion Jason just shared of being in communion, being with a set of people in a sacred space with an intent of connecting to the self, to the community, to a higher power. Really, really powerful piece of our mental fitness that gets so neglected by so many of us. Jason, it's such a treat to get to speak with you. We're going to have you back. I can't wait to see you. It's been a little bit between the pandemic and our busy lives since we've gotten to see each other in real life and embrace. But I really just appreciated your guidance over my career and your friendship and your partnership. And thank you so much for everything you shared today about mental fitness and mental health and your very unique perspective on the wellness world. You and Colleen have been such a just wonderful presence and supporter to so many of us, and so it's just a treat to have you on, man. Thanks so much for your time. I'm wondering if you can leave us with a thought. You've left us with so many, but there's something that we were going to engage in over the next week in terms of really maybe finding a little bit more space in our wellness, a little more amplitude in our mental fitness. What would you have us be doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm a big believer of editing and not adding, and taking an honest look at your time, what you like, what you dislike, and incorporating more of those practices or modalities into your everyday life. So for me, that's walking. I don't like carve out an hour to just go for a walk. I integrate walking in everything I do. So that means I have a rule, if it's less than 5 flights, I take the steps. I try to do calls walking. I try to do these micro walks. I'm a big believer in that. So that's like my takeaway for the audience is it's about editing and not adding in terms of your wellness routine. And if you're going to, and try to figure out what you like and incorporate it into your day and be reasonable of what you like and what you have time for.
And I love the idea of editing everyone, right? It's not like there's some new mystery, exercise routine or powder or potion that you need, that maybe it's just right in front of you. Like Jason, right? Walking. It's been with him his whole life, but it's something that takes more intentionality and maybe a little bit more of a appreciation of and an incorporation, that he's sort of editing more of that into his life, which requires sometimes editing things out. And I really, it's a very good counsel for all of us. We accumulate so many things and so many routines and ideas, and to sort of narrow it down and get a more clear, more centered focus about you, your wellness, and your mental fitness. Everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you for another hour, to get to have a little bit of a voice as you're thinking about your mental health and your mental fitness. I hope, as with all episodes, you hear my encouragement, my acknowledgement that it's can be challenging and tough, and my firm belief that it's certainly worth it. Thanks so much for joining us again. I'm Dr. Drew Ramsey. This is Jason Wachob. Please check out Jason's books with Wealth and the Art of Wellbeing, as well as also great information on Mindbodygreen. They've got a lot of interesting new products, a clean coffee. They've got some really high quality supplements. So if you're looking for those things, Jason and Colleen are really a group, a couple that I trust and I look to as real experts in this space. Jason, thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you down the road.
Thank you so much, Drew.